Plastic is no longer just an environmental issue. At this point, it is definitely also a human health issue. Every day we eat, drink, absorb through our skin and breathe in microscopic plastic particles from food packaging, receipts, drinking water, beer and soda, household dust created by synthetic bedding, carpeting, rugs, flooring, and pretty much everything else in our house. Research study after research study in humans has now associated microplastics and nanoplastics with inflammation, changes in gut and reproductive health, brain health, and potentially greater cardiovascular risk. We can all agree, at least, that plastic particles in our brain, bones, reproductive organs, including placentas, intestines, blood vessels, breast milk, and heart, probably are not good for anyone. Today, we'll examine what the latest research actually shows, what scientists still don't know, and the practical, natural, low-risk steps that may help reduce unnecessary exposure. I believe protecting your health shouldn't be driven by fear. It should begin with awareness, better choices, and prevention, because plastic is absolutely, positively unavoidable. We can all agree with that. But that's even more reason to avoid it where we can and also detox it out of our bodies to the extent that we can. Welcome to the Foundational Health Podcast, where we provide education and inspiration to help guide you on your journey to look better, feel better, and most importantly, heal better. Hello and welcome back to the Foundational Health Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kevin Schultz, and today we're going to talk about microplastics and how to avoid them when you can. The intent of the podcast today is not to scare you, but instead to give you education and inspiration to make different and better choices if you choose to. In preparing for this podcast, there's a ton of information out there, and here's what I found. There is such a massive amount of information. So what I decided to do, which is something different than I've ever done in the past with any past podcasts that is I decided to take 10 different recent articles on microplastics affecting the human body and break each of those down to really the main takeaways, just a couple takeaways from each one. So we're going to start with that today. And then after those 10 articles, I'm going to discuss 10 practical and simple things you can do to reduce your exposure to these plastic particles. And then be sure to stick around to the end where I'll share practical things my family currently does on a regular basis, and I'll have some of that sprinkled in throughout as well, but things that we do on a regular basis to reduce and eliminate plastics from our lives and our bodies. Article number 1 is entitled, Hidden in Plain Sight, How Everyday Items Fill Our Bodies with Microplastics. So the takeaways here. Microplastics are generated by ordinary products, which I've already mentioned, but this article talks about how they're generated by ordinary products like synthetic clothing, carpeting, tires, paint, food packaging, and plastic containers. And then also reiterates that there's 3 major routes that it enters the body, and that's through ingestion, inhalation, and absorption through our skin. Food and beverages are contaminated through environmental pollution, food processing, packaging, and storage. So multiple different ways that it talks about that we can get these plastics into our body. And again, they're everywhere. And then it also talks about indoor air is an often overlooked source because synthetic fabrics and household furnishings continuously release these microscopic fiber dust into our living environment. It also says that microplastics have been detected in blood and numerous organs, showing that these plastic particles can move beyond the digestive tract. So the biggest takeaway from this article is you don't need to live beside a landfill to encounter microplastics. They're inside our kitchens, our cars, our closets, and everywhere else in our home and our environment. Article number 2 is entitled Microplastics Found in 9 of 10 Prostate Cancer Samples in a Pilot Study. Takeaways from this article. Plastic particles were detected in 9 out of 10 prostate cancer tumor samples. In the 9 that had cancerous tissue, that tissue contained more than twice the concentration found in nearby non-cancerous tissue. So the question is whether tumors retain particles differently or whether local inflammation attracts or traps these particles and then causes cancer as a result of that? And that really is a legitimate question that they don't necessarily know the answer to yet. Prostate tissue adds another reproductive organ to the growing list of locations where microplastics have been detected. Now, this article and many other articles contain at the end of them or somewhere throughout something that's called the expert's warning. I find it comical that like in so many of these articles, like they talk about the doctors doing the studies and it's just Dr. So-and-so, like, no big deal. But then when they get to the end to warn you about how you shouldn't be scared or why you should take this as a grain of salt, that person now becomes the expert. And that was like article after article after article. The experts warn, however. And this expert in this case is a gentleman named Dr. Chris D'Armit. And here's what he says about this prostate cancer study. We are being frightened over nothing. There is currently no direct link or correlation between microplastics and cancer development. There are, however, naturally occurring particles that have been shown to cause cancer, such as rocks, wood, and leather. So Dr. Chris wants you to be scared of rocks, wood, and leather, but don't worry about plastics. So I found this just fascinating. Like, wow, that's quite the statement. So I chose to Google, like, who is this dude? And I find out that he is the founder and president of the Plastics Research Council, and he's a consultant for Procter & Gamble, Disney, Lego, Apple, and iRobot, and owns his own plastic company that develops breakthrough formulations and products for thermoplastics. So I don't tell you all of this to throw Dr. Chris under the bus, although I basically am. However, I tell you this because it's everywhere. Like, there's so much information about microplastics out there, but then you always have the other side of the story and the experts coming on CNN and ABC and CBS and saying you really have nothing to worry about. No scientific studies actually show this. And that's really all BS. They're just choosing to ignore the scientific studies that have been done. Just like any area, there's more that needs to be done to prove the things that I just talked about. Like, are these tumors developing because of the microplastics, or are there tumors already there and they just happen to have a prevalence to kind of trap these microplastics? Those are the things that we don't know. But again, I think we can all agree that, plastics in our body probably isn't a great thing, right? Article number 3, microplastic found in brains weigh as much as a plastic spoon. The takeaway here, research detected substantially higher microplastic concentrations in brain tissue than in liver or kidney. So this was very surprising to them. 7 to 30 times higher, in fact, concentrations in the brain compared to your liver and your kidneys, the detoxing organs. Most of the particles found in the brain were extremely small, often in what they call the nanoplastic range. And nano, by the way, I didn't know this, I maybe did at some point, but nano is 1,000 times smaller than micro. So we're talking really, really tiny particles, which makes sense because of the blood-brain barrier and large things can't get into the brain, which is why they used to believe because of old testing, there was nothing in the brain. So they now have advanced testing, which is why you're seeing more and more research and data coming out on this, because they can show with this new testing and testing smaller particles and looking for smaller particles that it's everywhere in our bodies. So brain concentrations with this new testing have shown that it's increased between the samples that they collected when they first started doing this in 2016 to today's date. And then samples from people with dementia contain more plastic than samples from people without dementia. But don't worry, we're being frightened over nothing and you have nothing to worry about, says the expert plastic manufacturer. The shocking takeaway here is the brain is supposed to be one of the body's most protected organs. Yet again, research are finding more plastic there than in the liver or the kidneys, which are getting toxins on a regular basis, just part of that natural process. Article number 4, microplastics in bloodstream increase stroke by a 4.5-fold risk. The takeaway, the study involved patients undergoing surgery to remove plaque from their carotid arteries. So these were patients that had a lot of plaque, so much so that they had to go in there and remove this plaque from their carotid arteries. And here's what they found. Researchers detected polyethylene in the plaque of the arteries of many of the participants, not all, many of the participants, and even found PVC in some of them. Whereas PVC, well, it's in all of our plastic piping throughout our entire plumbing systems in our home and our drinking water, amongst other places. Patients whose plaque contained microplastics or nanoplastics had a substantially higher rate of the combined outcome of heart attack, stroke, or death during approximately 34 months of follow-up. So let me just reiterate that and break it down. They did this study on people that they were actually going in to remove this large plaque buildup in their arteries. And then they looked at the plaque, and the ones that had the highest amount of plastic compared to those that had none or very little, when they followed up over close to 3 years, 34 months, there was a 4.53 greater risk for those with high levels of plastic for having heart attack, stroke, and death. The shocking takeaway here is this is one of the most concerning human studies because it connects plastic detected in diseased arteries with actual cardiovascular outcomes. But it still, according to the experts, does not prove cause and effect. Article number 5, microplastics found in plaques, 50 times more abundant than in healthy arteries. So another heart study here. The takeaway is the researchers found much higher concentration, again, 50-fold of microplastics in arteries containing plaque than in arteries without plaque. Nanoplastics, those really, really tiny ones, 1,000 times smaller than microplastics, were found to be particularly concerning because their small size allows them to enter cells. And then when they enter the cell, they are interacting and affecting the body's immune tissue response, which is your immune system, your ability to fight off everything. So the question becomes, are microplastics helping create arterial plaque, or is arterial plaque acting like a net that catches these? The same thing with the prostate tumor. Like, we don't really truly know the answer to that. Either way, not good. And now, based on these last 2 articles and studies, we know that if you have plaque, there's more plastic particles in that plaque, 50 times more. And for the people that have higher rates of plastic in that plaque, we know that the risk of stroke, heart attack, and death increases by 4.53 times. Article number 6, microplastics in air linked to cancer and infertility, major study finds. Takeaways here. Airborne microplastics come from degrading tires, synthetic textiles, industrial waste, household dust, and deteriorating plastic products. This one was a systematic review which evaluated roughly 3,000 studies examining potential health effects. The review identified concerns involving respiratory inflammation, reduced lung function, reproductive health in men and women, and cancers of the lung and colon. So, to be fair and transparent, this was not a systematic review of 3,000 studies done on humans. Much of this evidence from these studies came from animal studies, and certainly there was some human studies, but also from animal studies, what they call cellular studies or mechanistic studies, which means they're studying the mechanism of how something happens in the body. So not human studies, still concerning. Article number 7, microplastics found in blood and organs linked to multiple cancer risks. The takeaways: microplastics and nanoplastics have been detected in blood and tissues, including the lungs, liver, kidneys, gastrointestinal tract, and brain. Plastic particles may promote conditions associated with cancer, including inflammation, oxidative stress, DNA damage, and abnormal immune signaling, like we talked about before, because these nanoparticles can get into the actual cell and affect the immune system. So the shocking takeaway here is the concern is not only the plastic particle itself. This article talks about how these plastic particles, whether micro or nano, also act as carriers for other substances. So this was the first study of its kind showing that these plastics will attract heavy metals, something they call plasticizers, and then other environmental chemicals that attach to the plastic. So they're not only just the problem with the plastic itself, but these other chemicals that get carried on the plastic. And that would make a lot of sense as to why it's causing more and more health problems with people. Article number 8, scientists discover toxic microplastics in every human placenta tested in a study. The takeaways here: researchers examined 62 human placentas, and microplastics were detected in every single sample tested. The placenta supplies oxygen and nutrients to the developing baby, of course, and helps regulate that baby's growing environment. And detection in the placenta demonstrates that plastic particles or their components that we just talked about, those other chemicals that can be carried with them, can reach tissues involved in pregnancy. So the shocking takeaway from this one was the placenta, much like we talked about the brain earlier, was once thought of as a highly effective protective barrier, even more so than the brain. And finding microplastics in every sample shows that the barrier is by no means not impenetrable to these toxic environmental chemicals and pollutants. Article number 9, microplastics found in human bones may accelerate aging and weaken the skeleton. Takeaways: a review of 62 studies reported plastic particles in bone, cartilage, and spinal disc tissue. These studies suggest microplastics may interfere with cells responsible for building and remodeling bone. Nanoplastics have been shown to enter bone marrow and interact with blood-forming and immune cells. Now, here's the expert's warning on this one. Finding plastic in bone is established. Proving that it weakens human bone is not. We have shown, the evidence shows that it weakens animal bones, but that does not necessarily transmit and translate to human bone, which I find kind of comical that you think it can affect an animal, but humans who are animals, it can't affect us. So again, that is the expert's warning, not mine. I'm not an expert. Article number 10, micro and nanoplastics are linked to Parkinson's and dementia. Takeaways: researchers studied nanoparticles and a protein involved in Parkinson's disease and Lewy body dementia. The particles appeared to promote abnormal protein accumulation. That's not a good thing. The interaction was observed in laboratory experiments, cultured neurons, and mouse models. So this was not a human study. Researchers found notable plastic protein accumulation inside these lysosomes, the cellular structures which are responsible for breaking down waste. The study raises the possibility that environmental particles could interfere with the brain's protein clearance systems. And if you remember what the brain's protein clearance system is, I'll talk about it a little bit later here, but it's that glymphatic system, which is the body's natural detoxification system. The expert's warning here is this was not a study showing that people exposed to plastic developed Parkinson's disease or dementia. The results are mechanical, and because of that, they're important, but laboratory and mice findings cannot automatically be translated into human disease risk, and I would agree with that 100%. It's just a beginning of a study shows concern. Part of our mission at Foundational Health is researching and partnering with wellness products that we trust. Our one-stop health shop is loaded with brands that we not only have extensively researched, but also trust and use ourselves. You can find everything from low EMF, red light therapy devices, grounding mats and sheets, non-toxic mattresses, saunas that help you detox faster without toxifying you, the best water and air filtration systems on the market, high-quality supplements and foods, exercise and fitness products, our favorite books, and so much more. Go to foundationalhealth365.com, click on Health Shop, and you'll find the links to countless products that you can not only trust, but also many that we have discounts set up just for you. Now let's get back to the podcast. The main takeaway from all 10 articles. So first of all, I really hope, I do realize that's a lot of negative information that I just passed on to you, but I think it was essential to show you that, yeah, there's a pretty big concern here, at least for me, but the takeaway is not one of fear. It's like, holy cow, yeah, there's a problem. And now what can we do about that? Because we know it's unavoidable. We know there's no way we're going about our lives and just avoiding plastic. So the main takeaways from this are that the evidence is really it exists on three different levels. So first, we know that microplastics enter the human body and have been detected in multiple organs. That is without a doubt. Nobody's going to disagree with that. Second, laboratory, animal, and human research shows several biologically possible ways that they could cause harm. Nobody can disagree with that one as well. And then third, a smaller but growing group of human studies is finding associations with disease outcomes. And one of the reasons that this is a smaller and growing is because, again, these weren't detected before. That doesn't mean they weren't there, but the testing has improved dramatically, as I mentioned, and they can now see these smaller particles in tissue. So they were likely there for a very long time, and who knows what that has affected over the years. Those are the things we don't know 100%, but we now know that they're there, and now that we know that they're there, now we're really starting to take off with finding these associations with cancer and other disease outcomes. So what science has not yet established is, again, how much exposure is dangerous, which plastics are the most harmful, and whether reducing exposure changes disease risk, although I would argue with that one and say, how could it not change and reduce disease risk? Okay, so now let's focus on the good stuff, which is how to reduce exposure. Here's my top 10 recommendations for that. Number one, never heat food in plastic. The number one rule here is simple. Plastic and heat should not mix. So some simple things you can do. You can transfer food to glass, ceramic, or stainless steel. Well, I was going to say before microwaving it, you don't want to put stainless steel in the microwave. So use common sense there, but you can, before reheating it, before microwaving it, or even for some people that are getting like takeout food, you can transfer the food to the glass, the ceramic, or the stainless steel so that hot food isn't sitting in plastic and absorbing as much of it. Canned soup. So how does this apply to heat? Because you're not cooking the soup in the can, right? But the way that this works is hot soup, not cold soup in the factories. Hot soup is placed into the cans, and these cans are lined with BPA. And I think everybody knows BPA is bad at this point, including the canning companies. So they now put BPA free on their cans. You're seeing this pop up on more soda cans, beer cans, soup cans, and everything else that's canned. And guess what that means? BPA free means it contains BPS. The only reason it contains BPS is because they know that there's no public awareness out there about that, but most reports show that it is probably worse than BPA. So don't fall for the marketing here. Just avoid canned foods when you can. And that's really the takeaway from all of this, if I don't reiterate that as I'm going through this top 10, is avoid where you can. This, again, is unavoidable. It doesn't mean like live your life in fear and never eat a can of soup again or never drink another beer or a soda out of a can. Obviously, we all know that doing less of those things is better, and that's really what you want to shoot for. Just don't make these things a consistent habit if possible. Coffee machines. So this is something a lot of people don't consider. They've got like their glass coffee pot and they just think of that. But the coffee machines with plastic tubing, when that hot water is going through that plastic tubing, that leaches a ton of plastic. Testable thing. They can actually test the amounts in there. So just do what my wife and I do, and so many other people have moved to, and it really is not a difficult switch. In fact, it's a fantastic and kind of, I would say empowering and at the same time relaxing, soothing, if that makes any sense. But that's pour over coffee. So we grind our beans, we pour that coffee, the beans, the grinds, into a stainless steel strainer that sits on top of our glass coffee carafe, and then pour the hot water over that. That comes from a glass container as well. And then you're reducing that toxic exposure. Plastic cooking utensils, just replace these things with bamboo because they come in contact with heat. Friction, which creates heat, can also shed plastic into food. So stainless steel blender containers are ideal. To be honest, my family doesn't have a stainless steel blender container, but we do have a glass one. And so stainless steel or glass containers when possible. And this is especially really something like if you're making smoothies on a regular basis, like on a daily basis, ideally you're not using a plastic blender for that because of the friction. Number 2, reduce routine use of plastic bottled water. So use filtered tap water. So you're actually taking that tap water, which is full of plastics as well as a lot of other toxins, so not good, but then filtering that, and then you carry that around in a stainless steel or a glass water bottle. A 2024 bottled water study detected an average of about 240,000 identifiable plastic particles per liter. That's a lot. Most of them were in the nanoplastic range that we talked about. Glass bottled water, sadly, has also been shown to contain larger particles of plastic as well because of the manufacturing processes and the plastic caps and lots of other things. And one of the reasons these bottled waters are such a huge issue is it's not like it's bottled in cold water, shipped to the store, and you're buying it the next day or the next week. These things sit in warehouses, not temperature-controlled warehouses, sometimes for up to a year, and they are getting very hot in these warehouses, and this is where the plastic breaks down. So if you've ever left a plastic water bottle in a car, like in the windshield or just a hot car, and then tried to take a drink of it later and it tastes awful, you're tasting plastic. And that is exactly what happens with these plastic water bottles. So avoid those. Store food in glass. This is number 3. Store food in glass, ceramic, or stainless steel. We talked about moving food into that earlier, but this is storing it. So this is especially true for foods that are hot, foods that are oily or fatty, foods that are acidic, or things that are stored for long periods of time. All of those increase leaching. So acidic foods such as ketchup, mustard, and hot sauce, ideally you're buying those in glass containers because that acidic increases the leaching from the plastic container that it comes in. And then fatty foods like cheeses and meats being tightly wrapped in flexible plastic. We know that because it's a fatty food, that a lot of the phthalates from the plastic are fat soluble and they leach into the food. This is where it gets to the point where some of these things are unavoidable. So some of the wonderful cheeses my family buys, and even the grass-fed meat that we get from local butchers, of course, these things are frozen and in plastic containers. So this is where it becomes unavoidable, at least for the most part, and the things that we don't worry about because of some of the things that we do in our life, which I'll talk about later. Number 4, replace plastic cutting boards with hardwood, bamboo, or stainless steel cutting boards, because cutting directly against plastic can generate large particles that enter the food, and studies have identified plastic cutting boards as a source of microplastic contamination during food preparation. And I didn't mention this earlier, but it's kind of fascinating with all of these studies they can do. They can look at these nanoplastics, for instance, in your brain and see that it comes from a receipt, or it comes from PVC, or it comes from plastic food containers. They can actually test to see what types of plastics are in there, and that's how they know if some of these things are getting in. Number 5, avoid plastic or silken, as they're called, tea bags. So pyramid-shaped or silky tea bags are made from nylon or polypropylene. And even though they look like fabric, they're not. They're made, again, from nylon or polypropylene plastics. And studies have found that plastic tea bags can release large numbers of microscopic particles during the brewing process because, of course, heat. So instead, use loose leaf tea, whether you're doing it at home or going to a place that you have tea made for you. And then you're ideally doing that with a stainless steel infuser, or if you're using tea bags, a clearly identified paper or plant cellulose tea bag. Number 6, limit disposable plastic food contact products. This one's pretty simple. For instance, if I use Starbucks as an example, when you go to Starbucks, we know that is a massive, like if you're taking that cup from Starbucks and they put the hot coffee in there, even if it's a recyclable, which sounds better, or a disposable. Actually, those are often worse because they break down faster. Even if it's something that sounds good for the cup, it's not good. So what you can do is bring your own stainless steel coffee or tea mug, and then you have them, I know people that do this, they actually give them their cup and say, hey, please put my coffee or my tea directly in here. Some people say that they're embarrassed to do that for whatever reason. So if you are too embarrassed to do that, well, all right, get your to-go cup and then dump it into your own stainless steel. So at least stopping that leaching from continuing to take place. So super, super easy fix. And that one's a big deal, especially for people that are doing that on a daily basis. And then also transfer hot takeout food right away. Certainly by the time you get it, especially if you're doing DoorDash or something or taking it home from the restaurant, there's been some leaching that's taken place. But to limit that, then you transfer it when you get home onto a plate, into a glass dish, whatever. And the reason for that, all the things that we already talked about, but did you know black takeout containers and black plastic utensils, which are becoming more and more popular, are the worst? And the reason they're the worst is because they are manufactured from recycled electronics that not only contain plastic, but also contain flame retardants and heavy metals. So they are the worst of the worst. So avoid those whenever possible. And you're even seeing those things show up in grocery store delis where you can take home sushi, for instance, that's sitting in these black plastic containers. And then some people take those home and microwave them, which is just horrible. So limit your use of all of that, of course, and then limit your use of disposable plastic utensils, bowls, plates, and cups. Yes, great for the environment. More importantly, I would argue, great for you. Number 7, reduce indoor dust. This is honestly an area that I hadn't thought that much about, not to this extent anyway. But if you remember, exposure is not only from food and water, but microplastic fibers are also present in indoor air and household dust. And they're present there because of synthetic carpets and rugs and curtains, as well as synthetic flooring and trim and furniture that breaks down over time and releases dust into our environment. And we've known forever that all of these things off-gas toxic chemicals, but now we also know they break down and create this synthetic dust. So the practical steps here is if you have a HEPA vacuum, fantastic. So a HEPA vacuum, vacuuming regularly with a well-sealed HEPA vacuum will vacuum up that dust and seal it in so it's not getting redistributed throughout your living environment. Damp dusting rather than dry dusting to actually collect that dust instead of stirring it back up. Opening windows. This is always great for so many different reasons, but opening windows for fresh air to come in, hopefully some of that dust to go out. And then a really big one, because you can't avoid it, is getting an air purifier. So like for instance, on our website, we have Wellis air filtration systems. They're phenomenal for things like off-gassing of chemicals. They are not phenomenal for things like this. And this is where another company, and I don't even think we have a link for this on our website. We certainly don't have any affiliation with them, but it's a company called Air Doctor. I have 5 different Air Doctors in my home, which may sound excessive, but that's how important this is to us. They sell them in different sizes and you can put them in different rooms. We have one in every bedroom as well as our living spaces. And then number 8, reduce unnecessary synthetic textile shedding. So this goes along with number 7. I'll hit on it a little bit more here. Polyester, nylon, acrylic, and fleece can release microscopic plastic fibers through wearing, washing, and drying. So the practical changes here are choose cotton, choose wool, choose bamboo, choose linen, or other natural fibers when purchasing new bedding and clothing. Doesn't mean you have to go out and exchange it all right away. Great if you can, and you can afford to do that, and you're willing to do that. But otherwise, as you're replacing these things, just make better choices with these natural fibers instead of the synthetic fibers. And especially, I've hit on this many times on past podcasts, but especially for your undergarments. So your socks, your underwear, your t-shirts, also pajamas. These are really important areas. 4 companies that my family uses. Someday I'm going to figure out how to pronounce this. I'm just going to call it Quince, since that is what it looks like. It's Quince. That's what I use for a lot of my underwear as well as socks. There's a company called Pact, P-A-C-T, Booty, B-O-O-D-Y, and then Hannah Anderson, which is what our kids' pajamas are made out of. All of those things great. And then avoiding low quality fleece products because those things shed heavily. This is something I hadn't honestly thought about. And as I was preparing for this podcast, it was one of those like duh, aha moments. But cleaning the dryer lint filter carefully. And then also something that we're going to do is keep an air doctor in the laundry room for sure. But I've honestly never thought about this. We're washing different plastic clothing. We certainly are not perfect. We have plenty. In fact, my shirt, I believe, is plastic right now. My pants are absolutely plastic. My underwear, my socks, for those of you that care, are not. They are bamboo. And so I've never thought about this, that our plastic clothing, which creates this dust, and that is what is in that dryer lint filter, and you pull it out of there, and you can just absolutely see those fibers going everywhere in the room. So that's something that we're going to change, is doing that a lot more carefully in the future, and then, again, keeping an air doctor in the laundry room to prevent a secondary exposure to all of those things. Number 9, nonstick cookware, especially Teflon. I think everybody knows about that one at this point. So minimize traditional nonstick cookware and then choose uncoated. This is the best choice. Uncoated stainless steel, ceramic or glass rather, that is lead free, and then cast iron ideally. So those are the best choices. And the concern here with nonstick is that it's something that's called forever chemicals. So we know Teflon, massive amounts of what are called these PFAS or PFAS, forever chemicals that are found in these non-stick coatings, and Teflon is certainly the worst, but that also doesn't mean that non-stick ceramic is going to be perfect. There are getting to be more and more concerns with that. My family, this is something that we use. We have stainless steel pans. We have also cast iron pots and pans that do have this ceramic coating. Without a doubt, it's better, and we'll probably continue to use that for some of our cooking. But in the ideal world, you're using the ones, if you want to be that person that's eliminating everything, then use the ones that I just previously mentioned. When it comes to improving your health, you've heard me say many times, test, don't guess. Well, I'm excited to announce that here at Foundational Health, we can help you do just that. Introducing the Foundational Health Blueprint, a very simple at-home lab test and natural wellness program giving you a complete look at your energy pathways, nutrition, stress and mood, the impact of toxic buildup, gut health, and more. If you're looking for one lab test to give you a clear picture of your overall wellness, this is the one. With this test and personalized guidance from our team, you'll have the education and inspiration you need to look better, feel better, and heal better. Go to foundationalhealth365.com, click on lab testing, and order your Foundational Health Blueprint today. Number 10, thermal receipts. I think this one for a lot of people is always like, you sound like a crazy conspiracy theorist if you say I don't touch receipts or try to avoid touching receipts. But I thought this was pretty cool. As I was preparing for this podcast, I came across a podcast from Diary of a CEO, which just happens to be the largest podcast in the world. It's a podcast out of the UK. Actually, it might be second to Joe Rogan. Either way, it is a huge podcast. And the name of the podcast was Never Touch Another Receipt Again. So hopefully I don't sound like a conspiracy theorist talking about this, since it's becoming pretty mainstream. But these thermal receipts are a huge source of BPA and BPS. And so what you want to do is, and this is good because more stores are saying, like, would you like that receipt emailed to you? So you can do that. You can choose electronic or texted to you receipts when possible. And then when you get the receipt, just avoid unnecessary touching of it. I certainly don't wear gloves to the store, and I don't pick up another piece of paper, or I don't refuse to touch it. Some people do. I know I don't. I think my wife does. but I touch it, put it in my pocket, and try to avoid excessive contact with that. Okay, so I also recognize that was a lot. So for someone who wants the greatest practical reduction without overhauling their entire life, just do these 5 things. Number 1, stop heating food in plastic. Number 2, use less plastic bottled water. Number 3, store food in glass or stainless steel. Number 4, replace plastic cutting boards and Teflon pans in your kitchen. Number 5, avoid plastic tea bags and hot drinks in plastic cups. So far, we just focused on how to reduce exposure with the practical steps, and that is step 1. But really, there is 2 steps in this process of not having these plastics affect your health. And step 2 is what I refer to as turn your body into a detoxing machine. This is something I focus on with nearly every podcast. So I'm not going to go over this in detail. I'll give you some quick pointers and reminders for people that have listened to past episodes. Number 1, exercise and move more. Couple things happen here. When you exercise and when you move more, even if you're not doing resistance training and you're just going for a walk or getting regular movement, you're firing up your lymphatic system. You're causing that lymphatic system to work more. That's one of your primary detox systems in your body. So you're allowing detoxification to take place. Also, if you're walking fast enough or running or exercising and resistance training at a high enough rate, you're sweating. Sweating is one of the also best ways you can detox your body. And if you want to really amp that up, sauna. Sauna is absolutely amazing. There are studies that show that you can remove more toxins in a 30-minute heavy sauna sweat session than you can doing a 30-day intense detox. So all of those things, fantastic. Number 2, eat real food. Real food, whether we're talking about fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, or beef and eggs or other meats, wild-caught salmon, are all high in antioxidants. And this is hugely important. So listen to this. Real food, high in antioxidants. Processed food, especially ultra-processed food, not only low in antioxidants, but typically void of 0. Real food, high in antioxidants. Antioxidants equals glutathione. So that means the more high antioxidants and larger variety of them that you get, your body will produce more glutathione naturally. You don't have to get it in a supplement form. Your body will produce it naturally, and the more glutathione you produce, this is your body's number 1 detoxing process in the body. That glutathione causes your body to detoxify on a regular basis. So that is huge. The other thing that happens when you eat real food is you improve your gut health. You improve your microbiome. You have better bacteria. You have less of the bad stuff, less parasites, less bad bacteria. And you also improve the amount that you go, the regularity that you go on a daily basis. The more constipated a person becomes, the more toxins absorb into their system. That is well documented. So regular gut health is one of the best ways you can detoxify your body on a regular basis. Number 3, drink plenty of water gradually every day. Think of this. I often talk about the sipping half your body weight in ounces of water every single day, right? At least half your body weight. Think of it as a mountain stream versus a swamp. If you're sipping throughout the day, think of that as being that mountain stream, constantly flowing in and out of the cells the way it's supposed to. For people that are chronically dehydrated, which unfortunately is about 70% of Americans according to studies, their cells, their body becomes like a swamp. So do you want to be a mountain stream? Do you want to be a swamp? Pretty easy decision. Number 4, focus on high quality sleep. This is the lymphatic system we hit on earlier with that study that talked about the brain and the brain absorbing microplastics and nanoplastics, especially. When you focus on high quality sleep and you go into the deep restorative sleep, this is when the lymphatic system kicks into overdrive and your brain's natural detoxification system kicks in and gets those toxins out of your body. So you want an environment that is quiet. You want an environment that is cool, ideally between 65 and 68 degrees Fahrenheit, and you want an environment that is very dark. lots of other things, but let's just focus on those 3 for right now. Number 5, for people that want to take a next step, Nutridyne has a phenomenal supplement called Detox Phase 1 and Phase 2. There's 2 different phases of detoxification processes in the body, and that's what that's referring to. Phase 2, pretty well documented, like things like sulforaphane, which is found in broccoli sprouts in very high amounts and other leafy greens. This supplement, like if you go, I would just invite you to go online, take a look at it, whether it's through us or somebody else, and just look at the ingredients, and you will be blown away at all of the things that are in there, from the sulforaphane to the NAC and the glutathione and countless antioxidants, all things that support the body's natural detoxification process. So this I came across as I was preparing for this. Colton and I were just talking about before going on camera that Netflix has a new documentary on plastics. I apologize. We'll have it in the show notes. I don't remember what it's called, but they have this new, very popular documentary. And at this point, I have not watched that yet, but I did watch the trailer for that documentary. And here's something they talked about in that trailer. The FDA, United States FDA, has banned 11 chemicals from personal care products that are used in the United States. Which you might be thinking, woohoo, that's fantastic, great, we banned 11 chemicals, awesome. In comparison, the EU, European Union, has banned over 1,600. We banned 11, they banned 1,600. And countries like Canada, Japan, Australia, and many others are very similar to the European Union. Why does the FDA not ban more? When asked, they say, like, we require long-term data. We require all of the things that I talked about, like the experts say about these studies, like this is, causation isn't being proven here and correlation isn't causation. So all of these things that they say, that's the reason that they say they're not banning these chemicals, and yet other countries are banning 1,600 of them compared to our 11. The only reason I hit on this is because think about that when you're thinking about like, oh, well, I saw a story on CNN that said this, that we really don't have to worry about these things. You do have to worry about them. You can't trust our government to protect you. Take your health into your own hands. So that's what my family chooses to do. And here's some of the things that my family does. Number 1, we realize that exposure to plastics and other chemicals is unavoidable. So yes, we avoid it where we can, and we do all of the things I talked about today to a pretty high degree. But the number 1 thing we do without a doubt is we focus on our overall health so that we are detoxing machines. And then we know when we're exposed or choose to have a cheat meal that our body is so much more capable of handling that. This is what makes the most sense to Sarah and I, at least, and it's why we don't live our lives in fear. We know all of this information. It doesn't scare us. We don't live in fear because of it, not in any way whatsoever. We just take action where we can, and then we depend on God's beautiful design of our body to do the rest. And the most important part of that is we treat our bodies like temples because we know we then give it the best chance to do exactly what we believe God designed it to do, and that is to detoxify and thrive. Always remember, you are a leader, and the best way to lead is by example. Even if you don't care about making some of the changes I talked about today for yourself, then do it for your kids and your grandkids. And if you don't have any kids, then do it for your future kids and your future grandkids, especially with everything we now know about how this can potentially affect reproduction. And even the stuff that we, if you even say like potentially affect reproduction, well, we know for a fact that those chemicals are in those reproductive organs. We know for a fact that they're massive hormone disruptors, like that is proven. And we know for a fact that these chemicals are showing up in breast milk. So do it for your kids, do it for your grandkids. Do it for your future kids, your future grandkids. And if you enjoyed today's podcast and found it beneficial, I want you to think about who needs to hear this message. Be a leader for them. Drop them a text and tell them to check out the Foundational Health Podcast with Dr. Kevin Schultz, episode number 52 on microplastics. Until next time, make health your hobby. Thank you for listening to the Foundational Health Podcast. As always, if you would like to learn more about making health your hobby, visit our website at foundationalhealth365.com and follow me on Facebook at Kevin Schultz DC Foundational Health.